Okay. Now let me explain that in this diagram, the 4 small muscles are present all at an even more deeper layer. You would probably notice in this particular area that the origin of the muscle that I have named as 1, let me erase some of my earlier annotations. I'm speaking of this muscle that I have labeled here as 1. I mean, this is the sciatic notch. Did you observe it? In the hip bone, there is the notch present. We are viewing the entire structure from the posterior side. That means the anterior view is guarded. Now, if we look into this pelvic bone, we will find here the origin of this muscle that I am calling by the number 1. So the muscle that I am calling by the number 1 is known as Piriformis muscle. Understood? Which one is the piriformis? So let me write the name. Piriformis out here. So this is Piriformis. Piriformis. Short muscle, but deep muscle. Now, even below the piriformis, you see that there are this muscle number 2 and the muscle number 3. Now, both this muscle basically are having a common name that is known as gemmelli, G-E-M-E-L-L-I. Now, one muscle is present on top of another. That means what? If I zoom this area a bit more, you will find that the muscle that I am labeling as 3 is lying on the muscle that I am labeling as 4. Or rather, I would better label this as 2 and thus this as 3. Both these muscles are known as gemmelli, but the muscle labeled here as 2 exactly is known as superior gemellus. Accordingly, the muscle number here as 3 is known as inferior gemellus. Gemmelli is the term. What is the term? Let me even write that term as well. The term gemmelli is the plural of the term gemellus. The term that I have written here, gemmelli, basically refers to, see, the board is disturbing a bit, very honest. It's known as gemmelli. So one is superior gemellus, another one is inferior gemellus. Is this now clear, the concept? And see that there is a 4th muscle. Noticed? Again, very deep. I mean, all these muscles are having a common insertion, though, but the origins are different. And this 4th muscle is known as quadratus. All these muscles together are contributing to the stability of what you say, the hip joint. Clear? So what are the muscles that we have noted here? Piriformis, superior gemellus, inferior gemellus, and quadratus. Or to be more specific, since the quadratus muscle is present in even other parts of the body. I mean, though I have not lectured anywhere the muscles of the forearm, but in the forearm also there is a muscle by the name quadratus. That is pronator quadratus. But here the quadratus that is present is, to be more precise, it is termed as Quadratus Femoris. Quadratus Femoris. Did you understand now? Even there are few other muscles. As for example, you will note here that there is a small muscle which is not the whole one. This muscle is a cut part of the muscle that is known as Obturator Internals. This is the cut part. Obturator Internals. Try to recall that in the hip bone, we had an area that is known as the Obturator Foramen. So let me show you the hip bone just present on the side. See that there is a foramen out here. Obturator foramen is the foramen that is present on the anterior aspect. So if I could have shown you an anterior diagram, then obturator foramen would have been even more clear to you. But I think I have shown the obturator foramen even before. Let me check whether I'm getting a diagram of obturator foramen or not. So here on the board appears the front view of the entire hip bone. And in the front view, the obturator foramen becomes clear. This is the entire pelvic cavity. And this foramen, it is already labeled out here, is the obturator foramen. So the foramen that I am drawing by blue mark on. Now this obturator foramen is having layers of muscles, of which from the posterior side, what can be seen towards the posterior is the obturator internals muscle. Now since in the diagram just attached to the side is having the posterior view and the deep muscles as a part of the dissection, this obturator foramen seems to be a cut out here. So what you have to remember for this continuous 1 hour long lecture is that the three principal muscles of the gluteus area, which is known as the gluteus maximus, the gluteus medius, and the gluteus minimus. These are all the superficial muscles, even though in between these muscles, there are divisions in layers. On coming farther down below, the deepest layer gets exposed. And in the deepest layer, what you find is a series of 4 muscles. Of that, the topmost one is the piriformis. So this is the piriformis. Present just below the piriformis is the gemmelli, which itself is having 2 different sets. So the top one is known as the superior gemellus and the bottom one known as the inferior gemellus. And even below these 2 gemellus, the muscle that is present is known as Quadratus Femoris. So these are the concepts that I tried to demonstrate in this particular session. Clear? We can now move with this concept in our mind. We can now move farther below. So if we have to move farther below, we will next move on to the thigh area. So since we are viewing the posterior aspect of the hip out here, similarly, the description of the thigh area would better begin by the posterior aspect only. So let me bring on your screen the view of the thigh as seen from the back. Can I clear these diagrams? I mean, since the board is getting heavier with multimedia, so the board is getting slower at that same time. What you are now seeing is that same diagram, but now the back of the thigh is very clearly written. Now, in the back of the thigh, observe that this area is absolutely similar. We are having the gluteus maximus, the gluteus medius, and the gluteus minimus out here. We are having even the set called the piriformis on the top. This is the piriformis. These two are the gemellus. Okay, and even before the below the gemellus, we are having the rectus femoris. Now, the muscles that are continuing from the spines of the hip bone down below across the knee joint are these muscles, collectively known as what? This collection is known as hamstring. Right? Note here that in this hamstring, we have a muscle that is called biceps. If you have already seen my video of the upper arm, then you will come to know that there is a bicep muscle even in the upper arm. Yes, and that bicep muscle was known as the biceps brachii. But here, since it is present behind the femur bone, we call this as the biceps femoris. Since it's a bicep muscle, it naturally would thus have two different heads. Seps here means the heads. That means two different origins. So one head is the long head, another head is the short head. So this is the short head. This is the long head. The long is originating from the pelvic bone, but the short head is originating from the femur bone itself. Clear? Now this entire bicep is present towards the lateral side of the posterior aspect of the thigh. So this thus becomes, sorry, I made a mistake. This should be the medial, and thus this should be the lateral one. So on this side, we are having semitendinosus and semimembranosus. These are the two principal muscles. Collection of all these three muscles are to be termed as, sometimes we consider this as 4 different muscles, biceps being considered separately. I mean, the two heads of the biceps considered separately. We sometimes count the number of hamstring muscles as 4 instead of 3. But I mean, considering both the heads together, the number of muscles in this hamstring area is thus 3 only. So this is the posterior part of the thigh, just introduced. Not much time since is left for this class. I will now start up with the attendance process and definitely would stop the screen recording as well.